Have you ever walked straight toward a spot everyone else dodges, just to show you're not afraid? Behind our school sits a narrow alley nobody uses, not even in bright daylight. Most kids don't know its real name anymore. They just call it the haunted lane. The stories get passed down every year, older students to younger ones, each version sounding darker. One claims footsteps trail you when you're alone. Another swears a shadow slides along the wall with no source. Someone said the air turns icy for no reason. A guy in my grade told me his older cousin walked in joking and came out silent, eyes strange. No one has solid proof, yet almost everybody picks the long way around, rather than risk that strip of cracked concrete between two high brick walls. My friend is a year ahead of me. He thinks deeper than most people our age, and hates ghost stories. He calls them half-finished ideas that people keep decorating until they feel solid. The more times a rumor gets repeated, he says, the blurrier the line between fact and made-up stuff becomes. That afternoon after last bell, he stood at the alley's mouth, hands in his pockets, staring like it was a math problem he needed to solve. The lane looked ordinary, peeling paint, loose gravel crunching under sneakers, a thin ribbon of sky above, but he studied it as if it might reveal something. If he waited long enough, "What are you doing?" I asked. "Testing a theory," he said. "Which is? Whether fear lives in a place or just in our heads." He took one step inside, then looked back at me with that steady, almost bored expression he wears whenever he's about to do something dumb, but swears it's logical. I didn't want to go in. My stomach already felt tight from all the tales I'd heard since 6th grade. But I also didn't want him thinking I was the type who believed every rumor and ran the other way. So I muttered to myself that it was only a shortcut, nothing more, and followed him. Right away the air felt cooler, though I couldn't decide if it was real or my mind playing tricks. Our steps echoed louder on the gravel, bouncing off the walls so it sounded like a third person was walking just behind us. He noticed. "Echoes are the cheapest special effect," he said quietly. "Normal noise plus tight space equals instant company." He kept his voice even, like a teacher explaining gravity, instead of standing in the one spot the whole school avoided. We were maybe a third of the way through, when a dull thud rolled from deeper in the alley. Not a sharp snap, not a soft rustle, just heavy enough to notice. I slowed without thinking. He glanced over. "Don't stop. Pausing lets your brain invent details that aren't there." We kept moving. Seconds later the thud came again. A little closer, a little louder, like something had shifted position. I whispered, "You think someone's back there?" If it's a person, we'd hear footsteps or shuffling between thuds. We don't. If it's an animal, the rhythm would stutter. "This is too regular." He listed the options calmly, but I saw his stride shorten. He was listening harder now. Then the thud sounded once more. Slow, deliberate, almost patient. My pulse picked up even though I kept telling myself it had to be ordinary. A loose board, a pipe, wind knocking something over. Still, every story I'd ever heard rushed back, especially the ones about footsteps that didn't match any living person. We were in too deep to turn around easily now. He didn't say anything else. He just kept walking, eyes forward, like he was daring the lane to prove him wrong. We kept pushing forward, hugging the walls. The alley felt alive now, walls pressing in, shadows stretching like fingers, reaching across the cracked ground. Another thud rolled from ahead, heavier, closer, like a heartbeat echoing from the dark. My stomach twisted into a knot, breath stuck in my throat, my pulse hammered in my ears, loud and frantic, like someone pounding inside my skull, faster and wilder with every step. He muttered, "See? Exactly what I figured." My voice shook. Figured what? It's just noise. He shook his head. Not noise. The second your brain starts guessing, it turns into your worst fear. We crouched at the bend. He peeked out. Nothing moved. The thuds stopped dead. Silence swallowed everything. The alley seemed to hold its breath, waiting for us to crack first. Sweat slicked my palms. I exhaled slowly. Maybe it's really nothing. He paused, then said quietly, "Don't rush to nothing. Ask why you were so sure it was something." My mind reeled. He was right. All those childhood stories, the endless "don't go there," the whispered warnings, they had poisoned my head long ago. Every someone disappeared. Every I heard footsteps planted seeds. One sound and they sprouted, twisting wind into pursuit, shadows into figures, my own heartbeat into something chasing me. A sudden gust tore through. A loose board creaked, tipped, and slammed onto a rusted metal can. Clang. Sharp as a blade on bone. I jolted, heart slamming so hard I thought it would burst out. For a split second, everything went black. I was sure this was it. Then a few stray cats slipped from the cracks and trash piles, eyes glinting green in the dim light. They must have been hiding there all along. Frozen by our noise, skinny, matted fur, they padded past the can, glanced at us indifferently, then melted back into the shadows. He gave a small smirk. Wind, junk, and cats. I forced a laugh that sounded more like a choke. The fear popped like a balloon, deflating fast. Every thud, every shadow I'd sworn was alive, had been my mind feeding itself monsters. From years of stories, he nudged the can with his foot. The scare was never in the alley. It was in your head the whole time. I nodded, chest tight with shame and strange relief, like waking from a nightmare, only to realize you built the dream yourself. We stepped around the mess. No more sounds. The alley stayed narrow, but the weight had lifted a little. Sky showed brighter overhead. Gravel felt less like teeth. So the haunted lane isn't haunted? He shrugged. If fear makes it haunted, sure. Real ghosts? No. It sank in. The place hadn't changed. The fear inside me had started to shrink. At the exit, the sun hung low. Shadows stretched, but they were just shadows now. He glanced back once. Next time someone swears it's haunted, remember this walk. Most ghosts grow up in stories, not in walls. I managed a weak smile. Being brave. It's just seeing through your own brain's tricks. We stepped into the open street. Late light warmed our faces. The alley stayed behind. Still narrow, still quiet. But I knew I'd never look at it the same. Looking back now, years later, the real terror was never the lane itself. It was how those old whispers we swallowed as kids could turn empty air into something that felt alive and hungry forever, and how, sometimes, the only way to kill the monster is to stop feeding it your fear.